The vote credits, not even abstention. I mean, he could have said they could have abstained, but no, they had to vote for. So that completely floored him. And then he had another thing to take up, because the local authorities said, who is this suspicious character hanging around the village? He knows Russian, he's got French money, he's got a Russian passport, he's probably taking photographs, he seems to walk around the hills a lot, so he's probably a spy. So they put him in jail, the locals, where he stayed for about 10 days, 8th August to 19th August. And one of the reasons he managed to get out was, as opposed to when he was in jail in 1994, 20 years earlier, he now had powerful friends in high places, namely Victor Adler, the Austrian Social Democrat leader who went to the Austrian Minister of the Interior and said, this Lenin guy is one of the biggest opponents of Tsar and whom you're fighting, let him out. And the Tsar said, are you the minister after? Are you sure he's an enemy of the Tsar? And Adler answered, he's a more implacable enemy than your excellency. So, true enough. And then, so he was released. He got on a train on the 16th, but before he got on the train, to move out, he had to move to a neutral country, Switzerland. Before he got out, he got another shock, which was that in France, a leaflet had been issued entitled "The Declaration of Russian Socialists Joining the French Army as Volunteers." So here, immigrant Russian Social Democratic activists joining the army, including some Bolsheviks. So some Bolsheviks were actually so swept up in the war fever that they were joining the army in France. So he got on the train, and there's some personal problems. His mother-in-law was dying, and I just want to sort of emphasize how tough these first couple of weeks are. He arrives in Bern on the 5th September, so it's been about 6 weeks, less than that, before the outbreak of war. He literally steps off the train, goes to a meeting with the local Bolsheviks, and presents the principles of his program for the next 2 or 3 years. So either he managed to sort of superhuman feat of rethinking, or he sort of knew what he was doing. I mean, he didn't have to rethink. And what I'm trying to get with all these dates and things is to suggest the second one. But actually, the shocks weren't over. There was one shock yet to come, which was in some ways the greatest shock of all. I think the one that was most disorienting and emotionally upsetting. This was the fact that Karl Kautsky, his mentor and person he had sort of unreservedly admired as a writer, not particularly as a person, but as a writer, was now writing articles that wibbled and wobbled and wavered and did not live up to what he thought that Kautsky should be saying. So he was devastated by this. If you read some of what he wrote in September 1915, before these articles came out, he doesn't mention Kautsky, but he does say about he says, the danger of opportunism has long been indicated by the finest representatives of the revolutionary proletariat of all countries. And it's pretty clear he means Kautsky and Luxembourg mainly, finest representatives. So here's one of the two finest representatives writing these, essentially justifying what the Reichstag did. So a famous account in his letter to one of his comrades says, we discussed it earlier, I hate more than anybody else this dirty, vile, smug, self-satisfied hypocrisy of Kautsky, and I may have left out a term or two. So pretty strong, as I say, more emotional than, very emotional. But there was another letter to the same addressee a week later that has a quote that we don't read so much, and that's the title of my, what that includes the line that's in my title, which was where Lenin said, to his Shopnikov, obtain without fail and reread Kautsky's Road to Power. And see what he says there about the tasks of our time. And now he plays the toady and disavows all that. Okay, so the reason he's so angry, the reason he's so emotionally upset, is precisely because he feels that this book and Kautsky in general had been giving the most the greatest sense of the task of the times. I'm going to take that very literally because and examine it. What did he mean? What was in this book and Kautsky's writings, especially, that made him say this is the task of the times, meaning not yesterday, today, in the near future. So we can suggest that there be two ways of looking at it. The traditional way on the left is that the shock of the Reichstag and the other ones that are not mentioned, but other shocks, led Lenin to a process of rethinking Marxism, where he realized the basic fallacious nature of the Second International Marxism and returned to the roots or came up with new theories or whatever. And there are various various ways that this happened. One popular story is that he read Hegel and discovered the real dialectic and replied that, I mean, he did read Hegel, but that wasn't the cause of his political platform. And other ones is that, for example, some people say that Bukharin was a big influence on him, etc. So that's one. There are various ways of saying it. I call that the rethinking way of looking at it. I have my term for what I think is happening is aggressive unoriginality. Okay, where do I come up with that term? Because if you read Lenin's writings in this period, 1914, 1916, he himself sort of grabs you by the throat and says, I'm not original, right? I'm just saying what everybody else is saying. And everybody else said, this is the educated consensus, all educated Marxists were saying this, and they're portraying it, and I'm not saying a damn thing is ideological. I mean, it's original. So I sort of feel like backing off, you know, okay with it, okay, you're not saying anything original. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to sort of try to see if that rhetoric, it could be just rhetoric, but it could be express what's going on. And this will also lead us, I think, into first a definition of his platform, his outlook, his definition of the situation in these years, and secondly, a stronger look about where he got them and what the ideological background and the context of those are. So in this talk, I'm going to be discussing only the years 1914, 1916, and I call those the left Zimmerwald years. Just to remind you what left Zimmerwald was, it was, well, Zimmerwald is a little village outside Bern, I think, where a conference was held in August, September maybe, 1915, of various representatives of all the countries, an international sort of movement of people who wanted peace or who wanted to fight the war. And Left Zimmerwald became the name of the faction that Lenin led within that movement, which was more revolutionary, wanted to more defeatist and these various things, but much more radical. They were not pacifist like many of the others were. So Left Zimmerwald is the name of sort of Lenin's tendency during those years, and also remarks the first time that Lenin was a leader on the European scale, that he staked out a leadership claim. It was a very small group during these years, but one that was seen and known and so forth. Let's see if I got all my quotes here. At one point, I can't find this quote. So, at one point, Lenin says, all we left Zimmerwaldians say what Kautsky was saying before 1914, namely that a war was war was coming, revolution will come out of war, and we'll be faced with a new revolutionary situation. So, again, that's an example of what I call the aggressive originality. He's insisting on the fact that his left of Zimmerwald has the strongest connections with Kautsky ahead of time. Okay, so let me say just a word to help you put in context things about this book, Road to Power. You can see it's not a long book. It's a pamphlet, really. It's about 80 pages, 90 pages. And it came out in 1909. And it's the end part of a development that began in 1902 with his other sort of book of similar size called The Social Revolution. This is both these books are trying to say, as against the revisionists and the opportunists, that not only is revolution necessary, but it's becoming more necessary.